Good morning. Today we're going to be talking about fairness. Fairness. Now, what is fairness? What does it mean to be fair? It means things are sort of equal, right? So imagine that you sit around with your family after dinner and there's only one piece of cake left. So your mom or dad cuts it in half so you and your brother or sister can share that one piece of cake. What happens if they cut one piece really big and they give that piece to your sibling and give you the tiny little half? Where you would say, hey, that's not fair because the pieces aren't of equal size, right? So it'd be more fair if the pieces were the same size and cut equally. So, but think about another story. So let's say you're the principal of your school is feeling very generous and decides to buy every single kid in the school a bicycle. Now he wants to make sure he's being very fair. And so he wants to treat everyone equally and not favor one student over another. So he goes and he finds this really fancy, awesome bike and got 10 speed and it's got shocks and everything. And he gets this particular bike for every student in the school. But the problem is the little kindergartners, the bike is way too big for them, so they can't ride it. For the eighth graders, the bike is too small and their knees are bumping up into their noses when they try to ride it. And then you have the kids there's a couple kids that are impaired mobility, so in a wheelchair or otherwise can't really use their legs, so they can't use the bike at all. And then there's those kids that don't know how to ride a bike. So in the end, there's only a few kids that were actually able to ride this bicycle because he got them all the same bike. So what might have been more fair is if he had gotten a bike that was suitable for each child, even though they're different bikes. So that is the difference between equality and equity. And that's really where fairness comes in. So let's take a look at another way to look at it. This is a great image. So think of three kids that are behind a fence watching a soccer game. But they can't all see above the fence. So you have three boxes and there's three kids. You give one box to each kid to be able to watch the game. But if you look in this image, one of the kids was tall enough to watch the game, to see over the fence without the box. We didn't really need it. And then this girl, she's really small, so she could, even with one box, she couldn't see over the fence. And then this boy here, he was in a wheelchair, so the box didn't help him at all. So this is equality. You are giving the same thing to each person, like the principal with a bike gave the same bike to each student. But equity is different. You might be giving them different things, but in the end, you're giving everyone something so that they all have the same outcome. And the same outcome in this image here is that they can all see the game. So the tall kid, he didn't need any boxes. So he doesn't need any box at all. So you can take, that means there's an extra box to give to the small girl. So she gets two boxes. And with the last box, you could build a ramp so that the kid in the wheelchair could see over the fence. So equality, as I said, it's giving everyone the same thing. Equity is giving people what they need because everyone's different, right? As we've been talking about in plenty of these lessons, giving everyone what they need so that they all can achieve the same outcome. In this case, to see above the fence, to watch the soccer game. So this concept of equality versus equity is something even many adults don't really grasp or know about or understand. But I think you guys are smart, so I think you'll be able to pick up on this. So my question to you is, we're talking about fairness, right? So which is more fair in your minds, equality or equity? And I'm not going to answer that for you. You guys got to figure that one out yourselves, but do that. So I'm going to read you a story called Looking After Lewis. And it's about fairness and equity. And this book is written by Leslie Eli, and it's illustrated by Polly Dunbar. There's a new boy at school called Louis. Louis sits next to me and I look after him. He's not quite like the rest of us. Sometimes I wonder what he's thinking about. He often just sits and stares at the wall. If I ask him what he's looking at, he says, "Looking at," and keeps on looking. I show him my pictures and I say, "Try these crayons, Louis." He says, "Try these crayons, Louis." Then he draws very carefully. So I said, "That's good, but I don't know what his pictures are about." Em and I look after Louis at recess. He runs in and out of the boys' soccer game with his arms out in the air like a ballet dancer. Em and I thought he was playing soccer at first, but he wasn't. He just likes running inside the game. The boys get mad, but Louis doesn't notice. Sometimes Miss Owley says, "No soccer allowed today," and the soccer players stand around and don't know what to do. Then boys and girls play together for a change. The last no soccer day, we let our friend Sam get on the big tire with us. He wobbled, but we didn't laugh at him. Louis was standing really still, just watching. So I called out, "Do you want to come on the tire, Louis?" Louis said, "Come on tire, Louis," but he didn't move. Louis sometimes talks in the wrong place. Yesterday, Miss Owley said, "Sit up straight, everybody." Louis said, "Sit up straight, everybody." We all laughed because he sounded just like Miss Owley. She wasn't angry, though. Neither was Mrs. Kumar, who sits by Louis and helps him. They would have been angry if Em or Sam or I had done that. At recess this morning, Sam was showing off with his new soccer ball. Mrs. Kumar said, "Sam has magic feet," because he was so good at soccer. Louis watched Sam's feet closely. Sam says, "Do you want to play a game, Louis?" Louis said, "Game, Louis." Sam dribbled the ball all around the playground and Louis ran after him. Sam passed the ball to Louis. Louis didn't get it, but Sam kept going and Louis chased it with his arms out. Other boys joined in. If Louis's foot even touched the ball, Sam shouted, "Great game, Louis." Louis almost smiled. Louis drew a picture all afternoon. Every time he used a different color, he said, "Great game." When he'd use every color, he'd stopped. I said, "Show it to Miss Owley," and I took him to her desk. I said, "I think Louis's picture is about soccer." Miss Owley looked carefully. "Let's ask the expert," she said. So I got Sam. Sam looked at Louis's picture, and he said, "That's the game. That's you, that's me, that's the ball." "That's the ball," said Louis. Just then, the sun shone in. It shone through the classroom window. Sam said, "Can Louis and I go outside and practice soccer again, Miss Owley?" Miss Owley's eyes crinkled up. She said, "Would you like to play soccer, Louis?" Mrs. Kumar started to take off her apron and put on her coat. I think she knew what Louis was going to say. "Do you?" "Play soccer, Louis," said Louis. Miss Owley smiled at Mrs. Kumar. "How did we guess?" she said. Sam and Louis whooshed out of our classroom like water down a drain. Mrs. Kumar followed them. She had a ball in her pocket already. "You never let us play outside when it's not recess," I said. Miss Owley was smiling, but I wasn't. Not even a little bit. I put my hands on my hips. "Sam and Louis are lucky ducks today, Miss Owley," I said. Miss Owley's eyes twinkled and she got dimples in both cheeks. "So they are," she whispered. "What do you think about it?" She looked at me as if she expected my answer to be very wise. So I thought extra hard before I whispered back, "I think we're allowed to break the rules for special people." Miss Owley put her finger to her lips and nodded a tiny little nod that no one saw but me. We peeped through the classroom window at Sam and Melissa's great game, and I felt special too. So that is the story about Lewis. Lewis is, in this book, an autistic child, and so he had different needs than the rest of the classroom. So at first, the girl felt very, when Lewis and Sam got to go play outside and play soccer outside when everyone else was in the classroom, which normally wasn't allowed, she was sort of jealous. She didn't think that was fair because Lewis was getting treated differently than she was. Why should he get extra things? But the story is basically about equity, right? Because the teacher knew that the students were all unique and needed different things, and that because Lewis was autistic, he wasn't able to play soccer with all the other kids, but he was able to, because he couldn't handle it, and all the other kids didn't know what to do, but he was able to play soccer with just Sam, and he enjoyed it so much. So she allowed Lois to play soccer at a different time when everyone else was in class, so that he could play soccer just like all the other kids, and he could be like all the other kids. So even though she was allowing him something different that at first the girl was upset about, in the end, she was allowing him to be a kid just like all the other kids were, and allowing him to play soccer in a way that he could, so that he was achieving the same outcome as the other kids. And the girl got it, right? At first, she was like, hey, how come they get to go outside to play? But then when she thought about it, she realized, wait a minute, this is what he needs. He has different needs than the rest of us. So this is what he needs in order to be able to play soccer just like all the other boys. So that's our lesson for today. I hope you think a little bit more about what it means to be, what fairness means, and a little bit more about the difference between equality and equity, and which is really fair. What is the most fair? So that's all for today. Be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, be safe, and I'll see you next time.